Good morning, everybody. I bring you warm greetings from the football that won first prize yesterday. That's Ongama, Bryce, Mitch, as well as Kaiser. Be greeted. We would have come first prize if I didn't sleep very late on Thursday preparing for this presentation. And I guess the saying is true that work does stand in the way of golf. So today I want to talk about how the political economic environment is, going to affect us leading up to probably 2029. It's an honor for me to be invited back. Thank you so much for your votes last year. That gave a thumbs up to this, to the presentation last year. And also, I'd like to extend warm gratitude to the chairman, Mr. Lunga, the chief executive, and the wonderful staff at the RFA. It's been really awesome to work with you. And I can't believe it. It's 3 years now since I've been coming to this conference. It's been really awesome. So the politics and my experience throughout the years is that we've had a good sequencing of presentations here, where by the time you leave, you've gotten an overview of every aspect. This is the most efficient conference I've ever attended, and 3 years in a row. One day, lots of focused presentations that are relevant and make sense, and there's a bonus of golf, obviously. I mean, it's an amazing conference. So I'm going to be talking briefly about the doom first, the coming instability, and then move on from that to talk about what are the underlying fault lines in our system that actually create a permissive environment for things like what we witnessed during the riots and the looting spree in KZN. What are those underlying fault lines? And then the role of business, what are the opportunities and threats that I see, and what the ideal future looks like. So let me start with the party political environment. Because I've been making this presentation about the nature of the political environment, I thought I wouldn't dwell much on this because the long-term trends remain the same for me. They remain unchanged, and they've been unchanged now for the past 10 years. If you've been looking at South African politics, one major trend that has been evident since the 2009 general election is that the system of party dominance was declining. And for those of you who don't come from the discipline of politics, we measure democracies on the basis of the extent of the competition in the political space. To what extent is there competition? And to what extent does each coming election create a sense among those who are governing currently that there might be change? And the view is that the higher the prospects of a change with every election, the higher the probability that you're going to have what we call regime performance. People who say, while we are governing in this current 5 years, let us work hard so that come the next election, voters may select us. Okay, so our system, though, has been a dominant party system, which means it's a step lower than a one-party state. One-party state, other parties are not allowed to even register and contest elections. In a dominant party system, however, everybody may be free to compete, except that it's known that with each election, the one dominant party is going to win. So that's what South Africa has been up until, in my view, 2019. Because what we will see 2024, 2029 is a multi-party system. Now, the challenge with the multi-party system is that it's a lot messy to make decisions. It's not quick. However, I would rather have instability in terms of a messy decision-making process than stability under one party where you have high risks of rent-seeking, state capture, among other things. So the biggest influence on ANC politics, especially during this conference, this year, 2022, is succession politics. Who is going to be elected the next president of the party in December? Big. And part of why this is a problem, as far as I'm concerned, or has been the source of instability within the party, and in fact, the source of erosion and loss of support, is because the party has failed to transform its processes of electing leaders to be what you should do in a democratic period, in terms of which you give people who are contestants a free chance to compete freely to become the next president or the next leader. In the ANC, however, fortunately, you have the minister coming after me, so he will correct some of the things. And I think I needed to apologize to him in advance because I can be rough around the edges, in talking about politics, very passionate about it. The challenge is that the ANC didn't force transition in terms of how it does things, especially select leaders. You should have in a democratic party openness where people can freely tell you whether or not they are running for office. And in fact, they should be allowed in a free and fair manner to go to every region in the country to campaign freely, to say, this is what my presidency will mean for the party or your region and your province or the country at large. Now, precisely because that doesn't happen, you have had a system in which a mafia-like network of people, and they call them, I'm happy now they have a formal word for it, lobbyists, right, who are working on behalf of the ones who want to lead, and they convince people in lower structures to consider voting for their candidate. The problem with that is that the voting itself is not informed by what are you presenting to the table. It gets to be informed by which networks regionally control voting behavior and who do they align with elsewhere in the country, provinces, and nationally in order to deliver a certain candidate to the masses at the conference. Now, that's very wrong. So, as a result of this archaic way of campaigning, the party has been eroded because candidates then do not compete on the basis of this is what I have to offer. They compete on the basis of which alliances can I establish nationally in order to support my campaign. And those alliances have had, in recent years, elimination as a tactic. Okay, where somebody is eliminated and the risks are borne a lot more by people at branch and regional level than their national counterparts, because the battle is fought branch for branch, warm body for warm body. Anyway, spending too much time here. The issue for me with President Cyril Ramaphosa, I've written 2 controversial articles in the past 2-3 weeks. The first one, both of them have been published in Media 24 platforms. The first one, I was arguing that President Cyril Ramaphosa shouldn't consider a second term, and he needs to end the toxicity of his generation, And the reason I say that is because if you look at the politics of the ANC, my view is that they have been so entrapped in a specific generation of people whose values in terms of their sense of self-worth is questions of what did I do in the 70s and 60s and 80s. And therefore, to what extent does that entitle me to perpetual honor and respect and access to, opportunities and all of those things. Now, I was saying, because this generation is so fixated with what they've done in their prime, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, mainly 70s and 80s, you need to get rid of all of them, right? And introduce in the leadership of the ANC, and I'm spending a lot of time in the ANC because it's the governing party, at least till 2024, you need to introduce a new value system in the party, a value system that's premised on, that's driven by people whose sense of worth and value is what I can do for my country and what I've done in my 20s and 30s in building organizations, in leading in communities, among other things. Because those people still have a sense in which they are aspiring to do greater things, compared to the timers who feel that their best times was in the 70s and 80s, and all they are doing now is to extract dividends for their investments in self-sacrifice. But I was arguing that President Cyril Ramaphosa is best placed to do this by forcing the party out and having a chosen successor who is going to actually, to whom he's going to lend his political capital and position that. And it's been done before. I mean, the billionaires in Russia in 1999 made Putin, being a mayor who was not a national figure at the time, to actually run ahead of the communist candidate who was very certain was going to take over Russia come August 2000 year 2000. They said to Boris Yeltsin, "You are ill, get this guy to act as president for 6 months, and by the time the election comes, he would have gained a public profile," and indeed that was the case. Okay, so for me, the ANC is in the last act. I mentioned last year that in whatever way you looked at it, it was dying. So if a party is dying, my view was that the best strategy is to structure the death such that you make it possible for resurrection to come. So the one way of doing that is having a leader who is inspirational and be the one who is there by the time the party dies, because they can then, work to make sure that it actually rises again. In terms of the Democratic Alliance, I asked when the party recover. I'm going to deal with it in the next slide. The DA made a strategic blunder, in my view. In 2016, they got 24-point-something% of the national vote, and I feel that they could grow further from that. I predicted before the 2019 election that because of the transformation path the party was on, it was going to start losing the conservative aspects of its original constituencies. And that was fine, because the majority of its constituencies, which is mainly progressive white people, Indian and colored people, were still going to remain within the party, and its transformation path would attract the black middle class, and then it would grow again. However, they panicked from 2019, and my view is that they detonated a bomb on the party and actually may put it on the realm of the ambiguous. For the longest period as political scientists, we were very certain that the long-term trajectory of the DA was growth. But when they did that, after a marginal loss of support in 2019, I felt that they've shot themselves in the foot. And now it's interesting that an offshoot of theirs, which is Action SA, that is embracing the same politics that were advanced by Helen Zille before she came back and changed those same politics, has gained significant traction. First, Action SA, it's an interesting story. But my point about them is that they've recovered in the 2021 elections, but not back to the 2016 peak. So it may be that they still need to do a lot by political strategy in order for them to get on a growth path again. The party has got a significant cohort of young leaders that are growing, and I feel that Helen Zille has had her time. She probably should be looking at the younger group now to position the party to grow, because the politics of the old guard really will continue to always be framed in race terms. So they can set the party free by leaving. And then the EFF, in search of elusive growth, I'm going to talk about it shortly. I'm running out of time. So what I did here was to track the rate of change between elections among these major parties in the country. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but the blue is the ANC. They won't like that color, but it's the ANC. 2021, the rate. So I argued that the best President Cyril Ramaphosa could do for the ANC was to slow down the rate at which it was losing support, not reverse the support as many people were saying. So in the 2019 election, so in 2016 they lost about, I think the rate of change was -7, and then he slowed that down in 2019. In fact, he flipped it to the positive side compared to the 2016 level. However, in 2021 local government elections, it's plummeted to -11 in terms of the change between this election and 2019. My projection, based on the average since 2006, is that the party will remain on the negative trajectory 2024, 2029, bringing them ultimately to around 38% by 2029 of the national vote. The average was 3.4, -3.4. So 2024, they are going to decline further, and then 2029, further decline. Very certain party dominance is declining. It's a thing of the past in our electoral politics. The EFF, it had been growing and started declining in the 2021 election, albeit marginally. So to me, the suggestion is that there are opportunities for growth on the slight left of the ANC and on the slight left of the DA. So centrist politics seem to be what South Africans want. South Africans prefer moderate policies that embrace both the need for the state to play a role in the economy as well as for business to play a role. The fault lines in our system are well known in terms of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And the problem here is that we have dealt with this problem now for over 50 years as a country, because they first manifested in the late 60s, early 70s, where as a result of control in terms of who could gain what skills, we ended up having a skills mismatch in the country. That's why it was first business, and that's why business is important. It was business who pressured the apartheid government to relax the laws about color barring people from acquiring certain skills. Because by the late 60s, many white people had entered the upper middle class status and were no longer interested in the semi-skilled sector of the jobs. But the government had precluded black people from having access to those skills trades, and as a result of that, we started having this skills mismatch. It's continued up until today, where the economy requires skills which the education system is not delivering. And as such, you have got structural unemployment. So that has remained, and as a pattern, poverty has deepened. And in fact, we have allowed our economy to deindustrialize. And also, I mean, it's one thing for an economy to transition to services sector, among other things, services sector and manufacturing. But that shouldn't happen at the expense of primary industries. Because if you were investing in primary industries like agriculture, mining, and others, you are increasing the options for you to actually continue to grow as far as industrialization is concerned, in manufacturing and services is concerned. So the economy in its entirety grows when such investments are made. So the problem is that we have South Africans are too poor, and a lot of them unemployed, young people, the most unemployed. And if you look at this graph here, it shows that unemployment is higher among people with no post-matric qualification, very high. In fact, over 80%, in fact, over 90% of it, of the unemployed are people who've got less than a post-matric qualification. Business has a role, and here I'm going to make reference to an inspirational story that a friend of mine is busy, with up in the Eastern Cape. Business is important, first of all, as far as continued entrepreneurship and innovation. Solutions to problems come from a focus on solving people's problems. And when there's such focus, business opportunities come. And I'm going to be making an example here. There's a need for continued investment in the country. And as investments grow, it's got a multiplier effect, both by government as well as business. And then inclusion and enablement. And I can talk about that by referring to this story. Younger, the guy on your right, on your left, is a friend of mine who started a major, agricultural enterprise in his village of Nkondlo in Ngobo, in the Eastern Cape. I made reference to the importance of leverage and inclusion. Indeed, him and I built our businesses providing services to clients of development finance agencies, business plans, feasibility studies. Yes, this politics guy does know a little bit about writing business plans. Business plans and feasibility studies, we helped a lot of clients, and our client was the National Youth Development Agency. So he used that same skill to come up with something that can benefit his community. However, without the corporacy, the Human Stop Cooperative, he would not have been able to leverage over 250 million to that community in investments from government, initiatives of the private sector, in the grain sector, Jifada, among others. So here is a young, black, highly talented individual. That alone could never guarantee him access to opportunities or his community access to opportunities. He partners, rightfully so, with an organization that's got an established history, and they have plowed over 3,500 hectares in communal land in the villages in Ngobo. And their harvest is going to be coming. He was telling me a story of one old-timer who retired from work, anxious that they hadn't saved enough. Because he's clubbed together people's gardens in this initiative in Ngobo, this old man received 250,000 rand in the last harvest season. Income which, without my friend Younger, he would not have been able to make, but also Younger would not have been able to do what he did without the Human Stop Cooperative, who would not have been able to do what they did without government and private sector support that was aimed at funding them. So there's been a lot in terms of what they have been able to do. Bottom line is that In order to get South Africa moving again, we need our collective entrepreneurship, our creativity, and the social, political, economic capital that we've been able to get in order to make sure that we lend it to others and create an inclusive environment. And inclusion, by the way, inclusion is the way to go. Because what it does is that it creates possibilities which, when we act in our silos, we would easily reach the cap. There are more opportunities. I've seen what Mr. Lunga in the furniture sector, they are planning to do. It's fantastic. So I think South Africa can be really great if we can all club together and make sure that we leverage on our networks and resources and everything else, and for the benefit of our communities and ourselves. Thank you.
Because time is up, I will ask you one question, and I've got several, but they're all really pointing to the same thing. The one says, if Ramaphosa is not to stand for a second term, who's the next logical choice? Is there not a risk that if CR resigns, would he not only be replaced by a colleague who also didn't join the ANC to be poor? And will Lamola be who you would put forward if CR goes? Those are all, I think, pointing in the same direction.
Yes. So we've endured this question, if not him, then who, right? And it's understandable within the context, because it's him who's actually taken the fight to say, we are going to make the changes that are necessary, and in fact started reversing some of the trajectory towards a lawless republic that we witnessed. However, I've gotten to a stage where I'm saying, South Africa does sometimes prosper despite its politics, right? And kudos to the wisdom of those who designed a constitutional democracy. We still have the last frontier, the courts, that have not been, captured. So I said in an article yesterday, I answered that question in detail, where I argued that so he must manage his exit such that the power doesn't fall on the opposite camp. I mean, they are avowed anti-constitutional Democrats. They've said it themselves, a few of them. I mean, also Uhlati Tony Yengen has said that he prefers a parliamentary as opposed to a constitutional democracy. So it's known that people are legitimately concerned about where does the bad governing of the country fall if Cyril goes. But I've gotten to a stage where I say, let's bear the risk. Let it occur, and it gets managed, because from a country, from a greater systemic perspective, the whole is bigger than its constitutive parts, and there are a lot of protections within the system. The worst case would be for a politician to come in, dissolve the parliament and the constitution and all of those things, but the political environment for that is long gone. There's no capability for the worst case to be witnessed as far as how our politics is done. On the Lamola question, it's strangely that's the name I was saying. That's somebody that could be looked at, or other people who are there within the ANC but are not necessarily in the limelight. With him, he's in the NEC, and the reason why I mentioned his name, I've seen a general table manners, if I can put it that way, somebody who's been, well reserved. We don't know what we don't know yet about him. Thank you.